You guys ever been to a haunted house? Now, I don't mean like, some trick or treat Halloween kind of fun house. I mean like a real haunted house that people say is actually haunted. You ever been? Well, I haven't, but I got my cup of stars and I'm ready to talk about probably the most famous haunted house outside of Amityville. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back with another Fright Fest review, and to learn what we fear is to learn what we are. By today, we're talking about the 1959 classic, one of the most important horror novels of all time. That is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, an author I think that everyone by now has heard of. You've at least heard of this story if you found out about it through the Netflix series that came out a couple years ago, or if you just have heard about it because it is a bona fide classic. I think everyone has actually heard about Hill House through one of the movie adaptations, the Netflix adaptation, or just word of mouth due to its legacy. This is probably right up there with Dracula, right up there with Something Wicked This Way Comes, as some of the most famous horror books that I've covered this month. But this one is really important. I'm going to talk about why. Now, Shirley Jackson, she didn't invent the haunted house. That was more credited to, what's his name? Horace Walpole, I think, about 200 years earlier. But I feel like I kind of talked about earlier, outside of Amityville, this is probably the most famous haunted house story that there is, even though, Amityville is based on a true story, depending on what you believe. But yeah, is definitely the most popular. You got Neil Gaiman, you got Stephen King, Carmen Machado, that all claim that this is one of the scariest books ever written, and I concur, and we're going to talk about why. So let's begin as we always do, guys. Let's talk about what is this book about. The Haunting of Hill House is the story of four seekers who arrive at a notoriously unfriendly pile called Hill House. Dr. Montague, an occult scholar looking for solid evidence of a haunting, Theodara, the lighthearted assistant, Eleanor, a friendless, fragile woman, well acquainted with poltergeists, and Luke, the future heir of Hill House. At first, their stay seems destined to be merely a spooky encounter with inexplicable phenomena. But Hill House is gathering its powers, and soon it will choose one of them to make its own, guys. That leads us to Hill House. Like I said, 1959. Hard to believe this book is that old because I read this for the first time when I was a teenager, but I read it again in my late 30s, after having kids and stuff, and it took on a whole new meaning. We're going to get into that by, as we always do, getting into what makes it good or bad. Number one, good, right off the bat, the characters. You will care about all these characters because they feel very human, and they have very human fears, things that you can understand, things you can relate to: fear of loneliness, fear of love, fear of ourselves, as well as the fear of the unknown. As you know, if you've watched my Lovecraft stuff, you know that fear of the unknown, I think, is our deepest primal fear. But this deals with a lot more than just being scared of what's going on in this house. Like I said, it deals with us having to worry about all those things that, really scare us internally, we never really talk about. And I think that is really the crux of what makes this novel so special. Is most horror stories at that time, it was an unnamed protagonist, a narrator, or something like that. Or, it was just very cut and dry. This is the good guy because I have stated this is how it is. This story gives these four main characters so many layers and makes you just relate with them on so many different levels. I think that's what really makes this book special. So these characters, the young ones and the old ones, I think they're all relatable because they have very human responses to what's going on in this house. And again, that's kind of what sucks you into the story and makes you really feel attached to them, to where you're going to be concerned for them as things start to get a little shady inside the house. But the biggest kind of fear in this book is the hidden violence. It's all the things that Shirley Jackson doesn't tell you that I think really make this scary. Instead of the gore and the jump scares, she kind of goes with those things that you hear but you never see. So I think that really kind of adds to the realism of just how kind of scary the story is. I'll have you kind of hearing noises, while you read it. I think it gives this an overall creepy tone, and that's what makes it special. It just keeps you on your toes the whole time. You keep anticipating. There's a couple times where you'll actually hold your breath while you're reading this because you're like, okay, what's going to happen here? You keep waiting for that jump scare that may or may not ever come. I give this one on my fear rating scale. This is going to be the highest one yet, guys. I give this one a 9, and that might seem kind of high to you. You're going to be like, holy hell, I don't know if I'm ready for this. But I think it's more because, like I just said earlier, you'll be hearing, you read this alone at your house at night in the dark and total quiet, you're going to start hearing some noises and be like, what was that? what was that? It's going to happen with this. And I don't think there's very many books I've talked about this month where I really feel like you'll be like that. I talk all the time about how if you're over a certain age, you can't really get scared by a book, but you can feel uncomfortable. This one I kind of feel is like on the same level with The Shining by Stephen King, in that it really does have you hearing those noises, and you really start being like, okay, I don't know if I want to go into, I got to go pee, but I ain't got to go that bad because it's dark in there. It really will get you kind of feeling like that. So yeah, 9 is the highest one I've given out this month, and we're almost through Fright Fest. So will I have one higher than that? We'll have to wait and see. We've got a couple books left. There are a couple of bad things. It is a little dated, like I said, 1959. It's not going to be quite as dated as like Bram Stoker's Dracula or the Lovecraft stuff that I talked about, or even Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's not that kind of dated. It's just a couple things, the way that it's just society looked at everything as a whole in right there where we're about to flip into the 60s there. But I don't think it's anything ever that's unapproachable that you'll really have a struggle with. But again, for modern readers, I think you might be like, well, this is kind of a weird writing style. But I think by page 10 or so, you'll be used to the way that she writes, and you'll see that it's actually a good thing. I think her writing style is just brilliant. It's pretty short. I mean, look at this. I say that, you care so much about these characters, but you still want to know more about them because that's how much you really like them. You want to know more. And I think that's why the Netflix series hit such a home run, is because it really expanded on a lot of characters from this story as well as made up new ones. But again, that's Mike Flanagan. No one does characters better than Mike Flanagan. So I think he was the perfect one to tackle this book. But it's very clear that he got a lot of the same themes out of this book that I did, and that is all about the character. And yes, the house is a character. So that is a good thing wrapped inside the bad there. So you guys will see. Let's get into why you should read it. Look, have you ever felt lonely? Ever felt out of place? You ever felt like your friends or family don't understand you? This is the book for you, because I think it really addresses all those things. If you're here for a scare, Hill House has that. There's lots of scares here and there. But this is one of the most human horror novels I've ever read. I talk all the time about what I love about King is that, he, again, like I said with this, makes you care about your characters. He usually has, 6-7 times the length to make you care about his characters. What she's able to do in these few hundred pages is magnificent. And I think that everyone is going to relate to somebody or something in this book, and that's what makes it different than almost every other horror novel that I've talked about this month, is every one of these characters, you'd be like, I can see where they're coming from. Hey, I've went through that. Yeah, that's exactly what I would be thinking in this situation. And you cannot overstate how powerful that makes this story. Look, you're going to care about Eleanor. You're going to care about Theodara. You're going to care about Doctor Montague. You're going to care about Luke. You're going to care about every one of them. You're going to want them to succeed, to make it through this. You're going to root for them. You're going to be scared right there with them. It's going to feel like family, like friends to you. And I don't think that very many stories from this time period could do that as well as Ms. Jackson did. Bottom line, you're going to care about these characters intensely. I will give you that guarantee. I also think it's a very thought-provoking book about human nature, about how we react to specific situations and basically our emotions in those situations. It is very much a character study on the human emotion, I think. And the scares are just a bonus, so there's that. So if you're looking for the scares, they're going to be there. You're going to be satisfied. But again, if you're like me, and character trumps every other element in the story, you're going to love this. You're going to be right at home with it. It is aged wonderfully. That brings me to some final thoughts here. I read this as a teenager, like I said, and I was all in for the scares. I was all there. But when I read it again in my late 30s, after I had a family, had children, stuff like that, and you look at different things, and it just resonated with me so much more because of the human element to her characters. These are all things we've all worried about. Is it all things we've all been scared of? Commitment, time, aging, all these things, love, things that you have always just been like too afraid to say to anyone besides in your own head. And it makes you really think that these characters are every bit as human as you are while you read it. And I just cannot overstate that fact enough about that's what made this such a wonderful book to me and one of the best books that I will cover this month. I've read it twice. I will probably read it again before my time on this earth is over. This is definitely one that I want to pass on to my children because I think it is a story that anyone is going to be able to appreciate, of any age, of any gender, any religion, any of that stuff. Anyone is going to find something that they like in this book. Even if they don't like horror, I think that you're going to find something that you like in here. It's just one of the best horror novels of all time, and I cannot say enough about it. So guys, please click the link below, purchase this book. I think that you'll be very happy. This is easily one of the best books that I've done this month. I put it right up there with the Stephen King stuff. It's very clear to me that Stephen King loved this book, and I feel like that's where he decided to develop a lot of his characters in the same way. And I think that's what's always made him a special author to me. She was doing it first, and she was magnificent. So guys, have you read The Haunting of Hill House? I hope that you have. Drop in the comments and let me know what you think, and I will talk to you there.